This is Change Over Time, a podcast where I think historically about things I geek. I'm Daniel Horowitz Garcia, the alternative historian. It's been more than 100 days since Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. Somewhere around half of the island's population still doesn't have power. This is the longest power outage in U.S. history. Between a quarter and a fifth of residents lack water. My immediate family is no longer included in those numbers. My mother and brother had power about a month after the storm. My grandparents got running water early in November and power on Christmas Eve. My grandmother celebrated by doing laundry. That makes total sense. You have to know her. This episode marks the first in a series called Aftermath, a multi-episode look at Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria through the lens of my family. I'm starting with my mom. Dona Edna lives in the southwestern part of the island. I visited my family over Thanksgiving to make sure they were okay. As part of that, I stuck a microphone in everyone's face and told them to relive traumatic events. It was weird, but the interviews were great. In this conversation, we do talk a bit about life right after the storm. But mostly what I talked with my mom was how this is going to impact politics. This is my mom, Dona Edna Garcia.
I'm Dona Edna, your mother. Well, it was terrible. It was a very, very bad experience because it came by so slow. It stayed over the island over 7 hours, 7 miles per hour. It lasted so long. It was terrible. First, we had the winds from the hurricane, and then the eye went by, and then in the afternoon, there was some sort of tornadoes that kept hitting and breaking the trees and ripping out the roofs, the house roofs. It was terrible. It was a very bad experience. And if that wasn't enough, after the hurricane, the communication just collapsed. No telephone, nothing, no light, no water. It was absolutely terrible. Practically all the bridges in the island collapsed. The roads collapsed. The sea came through by Joyuda and it just swept everything away. In Maunabo, in Guardarraya, the sea swept everything away. All the lines, the power lines fell. It has been absolutely terrible. And the response from the government has been even worse. All the lights, the roads, the street lights were gone. They flew away. So you couldn't cross the street. You had to be very careful. We went down about 3 days later to see the devastation and to see what had happened. And then about a week, we had the police, usually the National Guard, doing the traffic. But you know what's funny? Let me tell you. The day of the hurricane, there was a girl from Puerto Real that went into labor. And the trees on the State Road 308, well, nobody could go through. So her husband and the neighbors got a digger. They put the woman in labor and the digger, and they went cutting off the trees and making just a path for the digger to go through to bring her to the Cabo Rojo Hospital, and the baby was born in Cabo Rojo Hospital. That spread through the town like crazy. So we were very proud of that because everybody helped. Before the National Guard, before anybody from the government, the State Road 308, everybody, men from Puerto Real and from this area went, and they started cutting and making a path for at least one car to go by.
A few episodes back, I interviewed Dr. Jacob Remes. He's a disaster historian, and we talked for a while about disasters in general, Puerto Rico in particular, and what one should expect. I'm thinking about this particular part of our conversation.
In the interior of Puerto Rico, right, there are towns in which the state was not present for like 2 weeks, right? Like there was like no communication, there was no relief, there was no aid. Not from Washington, but also not from San Juan. And people there I don't know what they did, but people there had to figure out how to survive and how to help each other and how to sort of contribute to mutual aid without the state, without any of those ordinary resources, those ordinary sort of social resources. And that is both terrible, right? But also really exciting, right? It's this moment in which people are forced by privation to come up with something really creative and new. And possibly that moment, those 2 weeks of solidarity and helping each other because they had no choice, can be brought forward into time when the state finally restores itself and people can remember that, and it will change, and it can change politics.
This story from my mother highlights two dynamics, both terrible and exciting. A moment when people came up with something creative and new. You can hear in my mother's voice how excited she was that this happened. We're not just talking about a road. There's pride because people came together and did something for themselves in a moment of crisis. Jacob edges this forward, though. Can the moment of solidarity, the moment of helping each other when you had no choice, be brought forward to change politics? We'll talk about this after the break.
Hi, I'm Martin Baum, and I'm the host of Story Untold, a podcast about ordinary people with extraordinary lives. From traveling the world and working as a journalist, I've seen that everyone has a story to tell, and on this podcast, you get to hear those stories. Stories like Richard Holmes, a speech-language pathologist and former professional mountain biker who talks about his experience with a stutter.
You want to, advertise yourself as much as you can, and I would give people a name I thought was easier to say.
Stories like Martha Lenio, a former NASA mission commander who spent 8 months simulating life on Mars.
What they're trying to get at is how you pick a crew and support a crew for these long-duration isolated space missions without, everyone going crazy and killing each other.
Story Untold is about the incredible things that happen in life, the moments that change everything. Head to your favorite podcast app and search Story Untold, or head to storyuntold.blueberry.com. Enjoy the show.
Now let's get back to the episode. The aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico saw moments of solidarity. The question is, will those moments lead to political change? Well, let's go back to my mom for an answer.
Started with the truckers. They were the first one to hang a big Puerto Rican flag on their trucks. And you would see it coming and coming and coming. And I was wondering, gee, what's happening? Maybe it's just a group of truckers. But then it has filtered out to everybody. All of a sudden you see it in all the cars. People are flying the Puerto Rican flag. I see it as a movement of a sentiment of nacionalismo. Nacionalismo patrio, I see it. I think there's an awakening of the people. And I see this opportunity, I see it as a way to rebuild a new Puerto Rico with good politicians, with trying to do away with the corruption the most we can, with transparency in the government. I think it's a good opportunity to create a movement to change the way politics are in Puerto Rico. And I'm very glad to see every car with a Puerto Rican flag flying high and the houses with the flags up high. I think we do deserve this sentiment of nacionalismo.
To be clear, I did not see every car with a flag on it. It was more like a third. Still, given how segmented Puerto Rican politics can be, a third of the people taking the same action can easily be seen as a lot. Regardless of the exact number, my mom definitely sees a lot of people getting behind this sentiment. She also sees a lot of potential, the potential to create a movement capable of changing politics across the island. She continues about how she believes the Puerto Rican government is feeling threatened by this sense of nacionalismo.
Well, the way I see it, I think they feel threatened by this nationalist movement. I think that they're a little scared, or at least they're thinking twice, And if you create a movement and a country unites, it's not very easy to go against them. It's a threat. I see it that, to me, I think they see it as a threat. To me, I believe they see it. This national movement, this thing where Carmen Julian, she had spoken out loud, Lin-Manuel, René Pérez from Calle 13, he will just blast out loud. So, I see it as like it keeps them thinking. It have them thinking, There's a movement here. And I think that's the reason they attack Carmen Julian so much, because she's a threat.
Carmen Julian Cruz is the current mayor of San Juan. She has been sharply critical of the Trump administration's mishandling of the disaster response. Lin-Manuel Miranda is an actor most famous for playing Alexander Hamilton in the play Hamilton. René Pérez, also known as Residente, is a founder of the group Calle 13 and is known for his political commentary almost as much as his music. So at this point in the conversation, my mother has identified a movement among truckers that has spread to a large section of the general public. Then she has added the voices of well-known entertainers, as well as a rising political figure. It turns out Jacob said this would happen.
Right, I think we see this in lots of disasters. We see all this outpouring of wanting to help, right? We're told so often that what happens in disasters is the opposite, is antisocial behavior, looting, and people, all the things that we were told that first week of Katrina that people were doing, the people acting like animals, and rape, murder, pillage, looting. And I think it's, in contrast, what we actually see in disasters is this outpouring of support, both outside the disaster area, right, like what you're talking about, but also inside the disaster area. And the challenge, the real question is how, as you're saying, how do you continue that past the moment of crisis? How do you remember, both in terms of spaces, but also in terms of social practices, how do you remember the way you felt when you were eager to help people who you couldn't in your imagined community? And how do you keep that up in a year or 2 years or 3 years?
The crisis in Puerto Rico is not over. My grandparents got power on Christmas Eve. There are still thousands of people without water. It is absolutely important to meet immediate needs. But in Puerto Rico, immediate needs cannot be divorced from the political situation. On the island, everything comes back to status. What is the political relationship between the island and the United States?
I hope the country progresses and moves forward. We get light. Poor people that doesn't have power, that they will get it, they will get drinking water, and that we'll get a government that will take us to a real clear definition of what we are. Are we or are we not? It's time we define ourselves. It's been 500 years.
I asked Dona Edna what she thought would happen, and she gave me a list of what she wished for. My mother's wishes for the future all revolve around the status question.
I wish Carmen Julian will get elected and she could do something about it. I wish Luis Gutierrez really comes and help and pushes towards autonomy, towards some kind of sovereignty, some pact, even an association, something with Washington, and it gets us out of this dilemma. I see this as a dilemma. So I wish that could be resolved. It will take 20, 30, maybe another 100 years. But I wish for that. Because we are and we are not. You can go on like that. 500 years, come on. It's shameful.
My mother still puts a lot of stock in electing good politicians. She hopes Luis Gutierrez will move things forward. Gutierrez is a congressman from Chicago. He announced in late 2017 that he would be retiring from Congress and would be spending his time focusing on Puerto Rico. But my mother is quite excited about Carmen Julian, the present mayor of San Juan.
Carmen Julian is the mayor of the city of San Juan, and she's a sovereignist. I think she's a rebel. I like her. They call her a pitirre because a pitirre is a bird that's tiny, but it fights anything that flies near it. And Carmen Julian is that type of woman. And the stateholders and some people that aren't stateholders call her a socialist and a communist, and they say all kind of things about her. But I like her because she's a strong woman, and she says what she thinks, and she has a great knack for asking for allegiance with other groups, and with the Dominicans, and with the gays, and with the people from the Caño Martín Peña. She has a way. That's how she won the city hall in San Juan, asking for allegiance. I like that. She has a way about that.
Julian, at least according to my mom, won the mayor's race by striking alliances with various groups. This built a power base that tipped the election. Perhaps this is a clue. My conversation with Jacob left me hopeful. He explained that the aftermath of disasters are horrible, and they are also political opportunities. But it is this conversation with my mother that is exciting. She sees the potential for that change all around her. She sees it in truck drivers, on flags on cars, from entertainers, even from some politicians. What's more, she sees that change coming if and when these disparate parts come together. She saw a model for that coming together in Julian's mayoral race. Of course, there are no guarantees, but there's a chance. And all it takes for everything to change is a chance. You can find more information about Change Over Time at changeovertimepodcast.com. I also tweet at Daniel Alt Hist. Take a moment to rate this 5 stars. It helps people find the podcast. Safe travels. Love you, Mommy.
Love you. Mwah.